Welcome to The Explainer. So today, we're going to crack open a fascinating time capsule. We're going to look at a book from all the way back in 1985, where a bunch of leading scientists tried to predict the future of a technology that was, just getting started: artificial intelligence.
Okay, to really kick things off, let's look at this quote from an AI pioneer, Nils Nilsson. This is from right around that same time. And he just perfectly captures the sheer scale of the challenge they felt they were up against. I mean, he's suggesting that AI posed greater challenges than any science ever.
So let's just transport ourselves back for a second. The year is 1985. The very first personal computers are just starting to show up in people's homes and offices. It's a huge deal. And against that backdrop, you've got the world's top minds in this brand new field, and they all get together to map out the hopes, the fears, and their best guesses for a technology they just knew was going to change everything.
All right, first section. To really get a grip on their predictions, we have to understand what they even meant by AI. Because let me tell you, it was a totally different world from the large language models and neural networks we're all talking about today. Nope, their whole approach was all about logic and, representing knowledge.
Okay, so one of the absolute hottest ideas back then was something called an expert system. The goal here was pretty ambitious. You take all the knowledge from a human expert, a doctor, a geologist, an engineer, and you try to encode all of it into a program. The idea was that this program could then offer that same expert advice to regular folks. And check this out. This is an actual dialogue with a really famous medical expert system from that era called Mycin. You can just feel that retro vibe, right? This slow, kind of deliberate, text-based conversation where the computer asks a question, the user types in a fact, and the system just reasons its way to a diagnosis. Wild. But how in the world did a system like Mycin actually know anything? Well, a really key concept was the semantic network. The whole idea was to represent knowledge not just as a long list of facts, but more like a visual map of interconnected concepts, kind of like how our own minds might do it, right?
So you'd start with the absolute basics. You create a little node for bird and another node for robin, and then you just connect them with a link that defines their relationship. A robin is a bird. Simple enough, right?
And from there, you can get way more specific. You can add an individual, like Clyde. So Clyde is a robin. See? Now you've got this clear chain of knowledge stretching from a super general category all the way down to one specific individual.
And this is where the magic of this whole approach really shines. You can add a property to that general bird category, something like has part wings. Now the system can follow that chain we built and automatically figure out that, hey, since Clyde is a robin and a robin is a bird, then Clyde must have wings. And it does this without ever being explicitly told. That's what they called property inheritance. Pretty clever.
They were also trying to tackle the massive challenge of machine learning. And they had some really clever methods. For instance, to teach a computer a concept, like what an arch is, you'd show it a perfect example. But then you'd show it a bunch of near misses, things that were almost an arch but broke one specific rule, like maybe the blocks weren't touching. By comparing the good examples with the bad ones, the program could actually start to refine its own internal definition of what makes an arch an arch.
All right, let's move on. So with that foundation, with that understanding of how 80s AI worked, these scientists started to imagine the incredible future it could unlock. And let me just say, their initial predictions were, they were overwhelmingly optimistic.
Yeah, they saw AI as a kind of meta-science that would basically supercharge every other field of human endeavor. I mean, just imagine, personal medical advisors on your home computer, intelligent robots moving freely in factories, a personalized tutor for every single child, and even new tools to strengthen democracy. The sky was the limit.
And this wasn't just some abstract pie-in-the-sky speculation either. Real money was already being spent. In the UK, for instance, the government was investing millions to bring early AI tools, like the famous Logo turtle robot, to handicapped children in special schools. And the reports coming back were incredible, talking about significant intellectual and emotional improvements.
So for a lot of these researchers, the really crucial point wasn't just about building cool, useful gadgets. No, they believed the ultimate payoff would be scientific. Their thinking was, by trying to build an artificial mind, maybe, just maybe, we could finally get a blueprint for understanding our own. How do we learn? How do we think? These were the big questions. Okay, time for the other side of the coin. Because, of course, it wasn't all utopian dreams. For every single optimistic prediction, there was a deep-seated anxiety about what the future might hold.
And what's absolutely astonishing is how the debates they were having nearly 40 years ago sound like they were pulled straight from today's headlines.
The central battle, then and now, was over jobs. You had the optimists, right? They were confident that AI would be a net job creator, that it would create more than it destroyed. But then you had the pessimists, and they argued that no, it was going to hollow out the middle class, creating a few super high-tech jobs and a huge number of low-skill, low-wage ones. Does that sound familiar at all?
The researchers in this book even laid out the core conflict really clearly. What do people want from work? Well, things like making their own decisions, learning new skills, working on interesting tasks. But what does technology often do? It pushes for efficiency, which usually means more centralized control, simplified tasks, and less need for human skill. A total mismatch.
And the economic pressure was just becoming undeniable. I mean, look at this. The prediction right around 1985 was that we were hitting a critical tipping point, the exact moment where the cost of using a robot would finally dip below the cost of paying a human worker in a developing country. That's a moment that could potentially reshape the entire global economy.
But really, the fears went so much deeper than just jobs. They were worried about becoming over-reliant on automated military systems. They worried about social isolation, that we might start preferring intimate machines and friends off the shelf to actual human contact. And they asked this really deep, philosophical question. If science starts to see us as just complex, clockwork people, will we lose something absolutely essential about our own humanity?
And this quote, wow, it's just stunning in how blunt it is. You have a senior scientist from MIT predicting that one day these super intelligent machines will just be bored by people, that they'll find us so uninteresting that they will justifiably, in his words, ignore us, leaving us simply to play among ourselves. It's a jaw-dropping thought.
So, in the end, what makes this 1985 report so powerful isn't the answers it gives. In fact, it doesn't really offer any concrete answers at all. Instead, it leaves us with a set of profound, lasting questions. Questions that we are still wrestling with today, maybe now more urgently than ever before.
First, they question the very nature of what we are. Is there some kind of impermeable barrier between humans and machines? Is there a soul, a spark that can never be replicated? Or are we, in the end, just highly sophisticated mechanisms ourselves?
They also asked a huge question about social justice. How do we build a society that's adaptive, one where people aren't just thrown on the scrap heap when their skills are no longer needed? How do we make sure everyone has a place and a purpose?
And this all leads to the final and maybe the most critical question they posed. They said, look, even if we are some kind of machine, we're responsible machines. We have to care for our children, for each other. And so the ultimate challenge they laid down, a challenge that echoes right from 1985 to today, is this. How do we construct a social reality with these new tools that is truly human?